Our shares in biomedical research company Biotron are rallying today on positive results from the first human trial of its treatment for HIV and hepatitis C. Now, for more on what this means for the company, we're joined in our Melbourne studio by Biotron CEO Dr. Michelle Miller. Dr. Miller, look, thanks very much for your time. In layman terms, how is this treatment different from current treatments?
Okay, well, look, thank you for having me on this afternoon. Biotron's HIV drug, BIT225, is different from the other HIV drugs in that it works in a different cell type. Most existing HIV drugs work well to keep viral levels under control, to keep the T cell counts high in those patients so the patients stay healthy. Now, the problem is, within those patients, you haven't actually eliminated the virus. The virus still exists in these long-lived cells called macrophages. And these cells exist in the gut, in the lungs, in the liver, and in the brain, and other organs as well. And they're infected with HIV at low levels and exist for a very long period of time. And existing drugs don't have any activity against the virus within those cells. So what you have is in these patients these I guess burning embers, these cells that are sitting there infected with HIV, slowly producing it and releasing it out to infect other cells. And the existing drugs wipe out that other virus, but it doesn't get rid of these. So what we've done is designed a drug that specifically is targeted to virus within these viral reservoirs that are set up in the patients. And we have completed a phase 1, phase 2 clinical trial in HIV positive patients, and what we've been able to show is that our drug does what we hoped it would do, which is to target HIV and reduce the levels within this reservoir. So we're pretty happy about this, as it shows it's a complementary approach, I guess, to what existing drugs are on the market, but it takes their treatment potentially to the next stage, to working towards eradicating the virus.
You talk in your statement about BIT225 being useful in future eradication strategies. Are we actually talking about a cure for HIV, if you're terming it like that? Down the track, at least. Well,
the industry and clinicians at the moment, that's really the holy grail. Yeah. What we know is that patients who are well controlled, who look like the virus is below the level of detection, the virus is still there, and it used to be thought, well, it doesn't matter, but now we know it does matter in those patients. Having the virus there long-term in these cells affects the general health of those patients and can affect the long-term outcome and health issues in those patients. So now people are trying to develop strategies to eliminate the virus, and what we're doing is, I guess, one approach that could be considered a path to eradication or to curing of patients.
So how advanced are you? I suppose, the question that people at home would ask, okay, this is great, sounds fantastic. How long until it's available?
Okay, so we're actually developing this drug also for hepatitis C, and we're in phase 2 studies with that. So we would anticipate, we're quite a way down the path. It's not straight from a university. We've done 5 or 6 clinical trials now with our drug. We would expect that if this continues, we'd be potentially on the market within, maybe, it's always difficult to estimate, but within a 3 to 5 year time frame, especially if you could get fast track approval through the US Food and Drug Administration.
This trial that you've been speaking about as well, that was conducted on 21 patients, is that right?
Yeah.
Is it considered
yes,
a
right.
small sample, or is that fairly standard for this stage?
Yeah, that's actually pretty standard. Within the area of HIV and hepatitis C, generally people do relatively small studies with the aim of looking at different patient populations in small controlled groups, rather than one really big, huge trial with several hundred patients. So this trial is what would be considered a fairly standard number of patients for this stage of development.
Is it a competitive space? I mean, are there a bunch of different companies, research institutes, all sort of gunning for this?
There actually isn't. That's what's a good thing for us, I guess. We've been interested in treating this underlying reservoir for several years. A company was founded 12 years ago, and we've been working on this really fairly solidly since then. And I guess the rest of the industry has started catching up because now we've got the T cell part of the disease under control. Now there's this focus on eradicating reservoirs. But while we've been working in this for the last 10 years, and we've been, quite a few clinical trials with this drug have been done, most of the other approaches are still back at the drawing boards, back at the university, and back in several years in some instances from being trialled in humans.
A lot of people might have also seen, I think it was last week, maybe the week before, a big story that really made it into the mainstream media of a Mississippi toddler. I mean, the headline screamed cure for AIDS because there was a Mississippi toddler who was born in June of 2010, and within 30 hours of delivery, actually, well, they knew it had HIV, the baby, because of the mother, I think, is that right?
Yeah,
they treated it immediately after birth and for 18 months. And now that toddler is considered cured of AIDS.
That's true.
What did you make of that that story? Just tell us what you thought and what people around you were saying about that development.
That was actually a really interesting story, and that came out during a recent International AIDS conference that was held in Atlanta that we also were attending. And certainly this child appears, by all current measures, to be cured. Now, the difficult thing is it's really difficult to actually, I think you could say the child's functionally cured because there's no evidence of disease and no detectable virus in the blood. But I think the jury's still out on whether they've actually been able to eliminate virus from the reservoir cells, because they're very difficult cells to access and to be able to see if the virus is still there. So while it's looking really promising, the problem is these reservoirs are set up right at the very, very early stages of infection, and they're not treatable with existing drugs. So the chances are that this child, we hope it doesn't, that they still could have reservoirs that are established, that are still sitting there latent or at such a low level of infection that nothing's broken through yet in that child.
From an investment perspective, obviously being able to get to market is a key milestone, and often quite a rare one. Another one is the cost, the affordability of drugs. I mean, what is the scope for this to get some sort of government subsidy, to be on the PBS, or to get some sort of FDA help, if you like, so it can be more readily available and hence your profit can be greater?
Look, that's always an interesting question. The economics of drug development is not always very straightforward. It's really determined by what the market thinks it can bear. Like, our aim is to license our drug to a potential partner. We're not anticipating entering into the selling cycle ourselves. So in some ways that'll be taken care of by whoever we license the drug to. But it's also controlled by reimbursement status from the insurers as well.
Dr. Miller, thank you very much. We're going to leave it there. And you explain it in very simple terms, so that's fantastic. So people can really get their head around it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
TPG Telecom is upgrading its full-year guidance, targeting between $285 and $290 million worth of earnings, tipped by a 41% rise in half-year net profit to $78.3 million. A strong result prompting the board to declare a 27% increase in the company's interim dividend to 3.5 cents a share, fully franked. The internet, voice and mobile service provider is getting a boost in subscriber numbers to its home